Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. It's a wonderful night. I have a creme brulee scented candle. It's very relaxing. So I'm gonna have a very unique take on something that's happening in Iran. Maybe you'll see where I'm coming from, maybe you won't, but I'm still gonna share my thoughts with you. So I think Iran is having its George Floyd moment, and I think it's a psyop. I think it's an intentional amplification that is meant to destabilize the region. What do I mean by that? Well, when America had the George Floyd protests, they turned into riots that really ruined businesses. People were killed. Tons of cops were hurt. And what happened was it led to defunding the police, which led to a huge amount of crime increase on innocent people. And the leftist activists did not care that crime increased, and instead they wrote many fake news articles because they did not want to acknowledge that their policy position of defunding the police was a huge mistake while they were simultaneously restricting gun rights. So the riots, I remember when that first happened, I didn't see the whole footage because social media was deleting all the footage and they were only showing one angle. When we saw the whole footage, he was saying he couldn't breathe even before he was on the ground. That guy, Derek Chauvin, and him, they had known each other, worked with each other in a nightclub. Floyd had done porn. He had a long criminal record. He had put a gun to a pregnant woman's belly and robbed her. So, as many of us can imagine how terrifying that is as a pregnant woman, to have a criminal put a gun to your unborn baby's head, and what kind of evil person does something like that. And he swallowed all his drugs of speed and fentanyl and different drugs to avoid arrest. And when those baggies opened up in his body, obviously you're going to overdose and go to cardiac arrest. The media did not share this. They allowed misinformation, I guess you could say, to spiral out of control, which led to huge riots. And at first I was like, maybe this will be a chance for reform. But then I saw rioters throwing rocks in innocent people's buildings, crushing their windows, smashing up innocent people's cars, setting apartments and Wendy's on fires, looting Targets, looting Macy's, police standing down. Literally millions of dollars worth of damage that has to be repaired by the public taxpayer. And the violence was out of control. It got out of control and there was complete anarchy in the street. Mothers couldn't walk with their children. It was a nightmare. And Facebook, later when you would criticize it, they would take down your posts. You had to frame it in a certain way, otherwise you'd get dogpiled on. So then BLM, who's gotten caught stealing all out of the money they raised, they're buying mansions. Patrice Cullors has laundered the money time and time again. There's so many news stories on how Black Lives Matter did not spend that money on actually people who needed it, but instead on unnecessary things. So those riots allowed people to get rich. It allowed the normalization of threats and violence. It allowed the public destruction of property. And surprisingly, a lot of people actually went and bought firearms for the first time because they were terrified, because they realized when actual violence breaks out, the police cannot help you because the activists and as district attorneys will bail you out. Kamala Harris had a tweet, you can still find it, where she used the Act Blue bail fund to bail out rioters who then went and caused more damage. So many innocent businesses were destroyed, and the insurance didn't cover all the riot damage. When business owners took their AR-15s and went and stood in front of their businesses, the leftist liberals said, this is wrong, it's just property, let them steal it, it's reparations. So innocent Koreans and people from India and all over the world who have their little tiny shops their businesses were destroyed because a criminal swallowed drugs, and a cop who was trained to do that knee on the shoulder had drama. So innocent people had their livelihoods ruined, and so many kids were terrorized in their beds by the riots. And then you have people changing the narrative. You have two sides, those who supported it and those who didn't. And with this movement in Iran, what I notice is the similarities of they are shaming Islam. I saw some of the just horrible comments about the hijab, about Muslim women, about Islam, and this is their George Floyd moment, I think. It is going to usher in the tearing down of an Islamic nation. And the women cutting their hair and then making a flag out of hair, this is something very similar to what feminists do by shaving their heads and ridding themselves of their beauty. So you have very feminist ideology coming in, and it is quite troubling because it changes the narrative of what it means to be Muslim. And even Lex Friedman, he had on some Egyptian bimbo who was saying, what the hijab is, and he didn't ask a right type of sister. It's fascinating how those who hate Islam get interviewed more than those who are knowledgeable in Islam, and it tells you what the agenda is. It tells you how they don't want to hear those who love the hijab and love the niqab and what it represents and how it changed their life for the better. They only want to frame it as a symbol of oppression, and America cannot fix its problems, yet is somehow backing Iran's protests. Justin Trudeau, for example, when the Canadian truckers had their protest where they didn't want to have the jab mandates, he shut down their bank accounts. He shut down everybody's bank account who donated to them, and he punished severely those who refused the jab. And then he tweets out how he supports the people of Iran revolting against the Islamic rule. Now, isn't that weird? He didn't let people have medical freedom or freedom of speech, yet is pretending to care about what happens in Iran. No, he doesn't care. And so the hypocrisy, the really intense hypocrisy of these liberal world leaders shows you that this is a controlled operation where somebody purposely hurt her, and then some people on social media artificially promoted it, boosted it, are letting people get outraged, using bot networks to spam hashtags, and they're creating a sort of cyber warfare. When the George Floyd riots happened, I watched it unfold, and I learned the power of social media to manipulate the minds of the masses in order to riot. And the riots that are happening, I saw one say, an Iranian woman in Western clothing rips off her hijab and burns it. So the psyop here is that they're trying to get Muslims to only view the hijab as oppression, and they don't want any country to be able to have Islamic rule enforced. Meanwhile, France doesn't let you wear your hijab. Meanwhile, there are people who say you shouldn't even have a right to wear it in a public school. They're more offended at you covering up than they are at Cardi B and Nicki Minaj and rampant porn. I mean, for God's sake, I saw like a 12-year-old girl who's in a belly shirt and booty shorts at her school. No uniform dress code. Liberals will be fine with that. They'll say that's perfectly fine. But if a woman is told, can you please cover your hair and be modest in an Islamic ruled area, that's somehow oppression. Notice how liberals fight to undress you, but they would think it's oppression to say to be modest and cover up. And they want to spread their ideas across the world. How can they do that? Well, they got to get rid of every nation that imposes modesty. Modesty is good for a nation, makes it strong, makes it less hedonistic. The liberals in America want to spread their hedonism and their occultic agenda across the world. And to do that, they have to tear down police forces. They have to tear down the morality people. They have to tear down the law and order. They have to instill chaos, and then through the chaos, put in their puppets. And then when everything calms down, their lackeys are in charge. So for me, reading these hateful comments about the hijab and the niqab, about Muslims, from all these people talking about Iran, it's quite sad. And it's sad that the women of Iran are letting in the Cardi B culture. That they don't see how quickly the slippery slope comes in. They don't see how you're going to have drag queen story hour. You're going to have American hedonism flood in once you let go of your modesty culture. As soon as you let go of your modesty culture, America, France, Canada, England, they will push in their new culture. They will reset your culture. But they cannot reset your culture until they get rid of what you had. Because tradition helps fight progressive hedonism. Traditional conservatism versus progressive hedonism. And atheists don't have the same moral values. If a woman wants to walk butt naked down the street, they think that's great. They are very, very different in their morality. And so, I feel very bad for the Muslim Ummah at this time, even though I think Iran is mostly Shia. We have to remember, what they're trying to do with the hijab, they try to do in Afghanistan. Okay, they want to tear down every single Islamic nation that still enforces modesty. Okay? They want them all in tight pants and yoga pants and booty shorts, crop tops. They want your daughters on the menu. They want your sons to be constantly stimulated by sexual energy so they can't focus on anything else. And so they can't keep their hands out of their pants. Okay? Look at what San Francisco has turned into. California. And then realize that these riots that are happening in Iran are going to bring that in. America is not somebody you want to ask help from. America has so many gangs. Over 13 million single mothers. A drug epidemic. Full prisons. We got a president who can barely talk. Okay? A vice president who she cackles like a witch and doesn't do her job at all. You have to understand that sometimes you may be upset that you have to wear a simple, modest covering of your beautiful hair. But ask yourself, do you want a drag queen twerking and shaking their butt in front of your 5-year-old at her school? That is what American culture is spreading to the world. The story of the Trojan horse, of Achilles in that time period, the story of Troy, that is a story that is quite interesting because it has a lasting effect on people where you think you're bringing in something good, but inside of it is pure death. Please, I really hope you people of Iran that you appreciate your modesty culture, because if you came to California and you saw what they were teaching in the schools, you'd wish you had your hijab. How many girls get human trafficked? How many women are pimping themselves? California basically legalized soliciting for prostitution. The level of hedonism becomes so absurd that you start to feel like you're living in a nightmare. And when you have Muslim children begging to go to Islamic schools, and you're actively tearing down Islamic schools and Islamic philosophy and Islamic values and all that in your country, what are you going to replace it with? Who's going to come feed on you once you burn down your own nation? Who's going to come in is America, Canada, England, and they're not bringing you a savior. They're bringing you a new system that's going to give your kids hormone blockers. It's going to confuse them. You're bringing in a whole new ideology that's occultic and that you'll regret bringing in. And to you sisters out there still wearing your hijab, your niqab, if you feel unsafe, wear it with pride. Don't let these liberals shame you for wearing it. Don't let any, neo-Nazi shame you. Wear it with pride. Allah has commanded us to do it. You are good for doing it. Love your hijab. Allah has commanded us to wear it. Be careful of the people who are telling you to tear off what Allah loves. Be careful, because this is like a psychological coup d'etat. The George Floyd thing was interesting, how out of all the police interactions, this one had to go viral, and they used it to fuel race riots and normalizing political violence against enemies and the destruction of property. It ushered in a new system that didn't lead to anything good, and where people made money. So with this example, where a woman is hurt and everyone's talking about her, it's like the same thing of a George Floyd situation, where people are destroying their own neighborhoods, making a ruckus, acting a fool, getting violent, making garbage in the street, making your own area that was beautiful dirty. For what? She's gone. You have to have patience. You have to be reasonable. If you want changes, there's ways to go about it without rioting and causing a ruckus. But they have to cause as much chaos as possible in order to destabilize the area, so the people revolt against their own leaders, so they can install a puppet regime that will bring in what the American cartel wants. If you want to come to Sodom and Gomorrah, you live in Iran, come to California, walk past homeless, walk past street hookers, come see the liberal utopia, and ask yourself if that's what you really want. If that's what you want your kids to see. Do you want to see a giant parade where guys are whipping each other and spanking each other and putting things up each other's bungholes? Is that what you want in the middle of your streets? Do you want women to be tempting your husband in the streets? Do you want more pimps in your culture? Do you want that? I really hope you look at your modesty culture and you appreciate it, because you're one of the last nations to have it. Will you be pleased with when your 12-year-old daughter is dressing like she's 21 and boys are bothering her, looking at her, and she ends up getting passed around and becoming hypersexualized? No. Better watch what you wish for, because you just might get it. The hijab is a wonderful thing. And sometimes you can hate something that's actually good for you. The male gaze is highly addictive and has destroyed America, and it's going to continue to do so until America decides morality needs to come back, until Christians and Muslims work together to be a religious conservative coalition to take back this country from the hedonistic, secular, liberal, atheists, and feminists who serve the occultic agenda. Be careful, because nobody cares about your country. They just want to get in so they can loot it. They can subvert your women. They can give you abortion culture, brothel culture, nightclubs. They can flood your streets with drugs. They can reduce your population by telling you to go into debt slavery for college and a mortgage, to give you high interest banking. This is what they want for you. They don't care that you're told to wear a hijab. They're just using that to get into your country so they can destroy it from within and use you as pawns to destroy it. Please don't burn your hijabs. There are better ways to take grievances with your government. May Allah protect the Muslims across the world, and may we all help to have a Sharia law and state that can survive the secular liberal world order. Ameen.